I'd like to come back to a question which came up very much towards the end at our session at noon. Someone asked, what are supportive conditions for our practice of Mettā? How can we nurture and support our loving kindness meditation? That's one of the well-known meditation objects the Buddha recommended, and Mettā is simply the intention of unconditional goodwill, of friendliness to all beings without distinctions, no matter what. And we can cultivate that as a particular samadhi meditation object, when sitting cross-legged, when walking in formal meditation, and it can lead the mind into deep and profound samadhi. However, this question is now in particular, are there other things in daily life, other supportive external and internal factors to foster and support our practice of loving kindness? So the first thing that comes to my mind is to make sure that we include ourselves in our practice of loving kindness. It is an interesting fact that so many meditation teachers have noticed that in modern Western society, so many people have big issues with themselves, feelings of guilt, feelings of being insufficient, regret, even self-hatred, self-loathing, low self-esteem, and so on. That seems to be quite pervasive nowadays. And interestingly, I noticed recently teaching in India, at least in Delhi, which is not exactly rural or traditional India, that they seem to have very similar issues nowadays as well. So if we feel that our practice of loving kindness is not fully taking off in our formal meditation, we don't make progress as much as we hope. Now check out, try to deliberately direct loving kindness to yourself, and very carefully, mindfully observe whether you can do that in the same way like to some other being you like. And many people can notice when they shift towards themselves that there's some restriction, something holding them back. They may be feeling that this is egoistic, or Mettā is about other people. No, the Mettā is about everyone, every being, and so we are included. There can be no doubt that the Buddha wants ourselves to include ourselves in our loving kindness. And it doesn't matter whatever faults we have, warts and all, as they say. Whether we have messed up really bigly style, whether we have severe character shortcomings, or we are thinking that we have that, it doesn't matter anyhow. Because Mettā is completely independent from that. It's not that you have to do anything to deserve Mettā. It doesn't mean that we give up on improving ourselves, but whether we improve ourselves or not, Mettā should be unconditional anyhow. So it's very important in our formal meditation to spend some time in checking out, making sure that we can wish ourselves well unconditionally and with the same strength and conviction as to other people. You can try out, when you have your Mettā already going quite well, you can really feel Mettā, you have the emotion and this beautiful feeling like a golden light or warm opening in the chest. You really feel Mettā, and not try to direct that to yourself. And it starts withering away or getting weaker, then we know this is where we have to work. And sometimes that may be the hardest one to work on. In that case, let's start with easy beings, include more and more, and only at the later stage, when the metta is already well established, then you bring it back to yourself. And you have to give a lot of time and attention and effort to that until you notice that it doesn't diminish the moment when you go to yourself. It should stay just as strong in terms of the feeling and the uplifting mood, just as if you direct it to other beings. I think in their meditation people often neglect directing metta to themselves due to mathematical reasons. Because the number of beings in the whole universe, we are supposed to give loving kindness to all beings in the whole universe. And don't ask me how many beings there are, but it's obviously many. And it will be many, many trillions and trillions and trillions, depending on how many beings live on other planets. But we have already 9 or 8 something billion here on Earth, just humans. And when you count ants and so on, and worms and all the other beings, it's already so much, and then other planets. So mathematically it may appear, if I'm only one of countless trillions of beings, then obviously the effort to others should be trillions of times more than to me. But it is not working in this mathematical sense. And sometimes we have to put maybe for periods the majority of our effort to really get the metta to ourselves going. And even at other times, it's much more balanced. Sometimes you want to put 50% or 20% to yourself. It has to be very fully included to ourselves, even though we are less than 1/1,000,000th of the number of all beings. A few other comments. So number one, making sure loving kindness to ourselves is really well established. Otherwise, we will never really get along there. It will always be limited how far the loving kindness to others can go. That's an important principle in Dhamma practice. Internal, external are connected. And interestingly, if we somehow feel we don't deserve loving kindness, we can't really fully grant it to ourselves, it will actually also hold us back to do it to other beings. Another comment, if loving kindness doesn't work as well as you hope, contemplate also the other Brahmavihāras. There are 4 Brahmavihāras, 4 divine abodes, for apamanya and the limitless, boundless abidings. What are the 4? Metta, Karuna, compassion, mudita, sympathetic joy, and upekkha, equanimity. And they can beautifully reinforce and support each other. And we can use our wisdom and analyze the situation and then decide which one is the best one to apply in that situation. For example, Karuna, compassion, is in many ways quite close to Metta, but has a slightly different emphasis. This is more about may you be free from pain, may you be free from suffering. Karuna, compassion, is a wish to all beings to be free from all forms of suffering, from pain, from misery in any way. And that sometimes can be easier. For example, if someone is obviously suffering tremendously, of course you can still wish metta to them. Someone with terminal cancer and crucial, awful pain, and of course you can say, may you be well, may you be happy. But I personally find that not so easy. I find it easier if I encounter an abstract suffering, the really severe, awful, tragic suffering. I find it much easier to wish that may you be free from that pain, may that pain come to an end, may you be released from all sickness. This is just subjectively, there's no particular reason, but it's just easier for me. So one can sometimes try with our Karuna works better. And of course, when we establish Karuna, you will notice in our mind that also it makes our Metta stronger. If we notice that Metta is particularly difficult to particular individuals or particular specific beings, we can try a Karuna to that particular being before we go for the Metta. For example, imagine you have got a mate at work who is just incredibly irritating and gives you a really hard time and has many weird and irritating characteristics and behavior patterns. And you find it very, very difficult to practice Metta. And then you hear, did you know she has this special needs child, severely handicapped, and for years she has, with greatest dedication, looked after that child. And then she got cancer, and it got really bad. Her husband dumped her and divorced her in that situation. After you hear that, it's probably easier to practice Metta, is it, or compassion. Who herds, herds. Have you ever heard that? The people who herd. Meaning, if you're over the moon and you're so happy, you usually not walk around and make other people's life difficult and go off in aggression. Very few people would do that. And most people, if they're really, really happy, then they also want others to be happy. On the other hand, we probably all know, if you are forced or you have determined that you do a difficult diet, or you stop smoking, or you've got a really bad migraine, then we become much more irritable. The more we already suffer and struggle, the more or the easier we do things out of anger, we get irritated easily, and we lash back quickly. So, and I found that it seems to be quite true. And whenever I looked more at individuals, I find very difficult. You usually find a lot of suffering. So it can be very helpful to use Metta, to use Karuna, compassion, as an alternative if you encounter someone where Metta is really difficult to get going because they're so difficult. And rather than doing that only in the formal meditation, one can also use in the contemplations. The Metta and other meditation objects can be developed now on different levels of refinement. And if you are sitting in formal meditation and you really want to deepen your samatha, your calmness meditation, your samadhi, it can usually not be done to a deeper extent by thinking and contemplating. That is too much activity, is not one-pointed enough to really go for samadhi. But at other times, we can deliberately determine now that there's a difficult person, and now you use also some contemplation. The typical way of practicing Metta for samatha in a formal meditation is just repeating a formula. In gladness and in safety, may you be at ease. In gladness and in safety, may you be at ease. May you live long, healthy and happily. May you live long, healthy and happily. May all beings live long, healthy and happily. You just repeat it. And then you can go quite deep because it's a simple mantra. But that may not be sufficient to contemplate a very difficult person now. there you really want to try to find out what could it be, what this person is suffering from. And then you go through that and you figure it out, and there's a more contemplation. You wouldn't get that deep from that, but it can help resolving these blockages for our metta. So one can use both at suitable times, sometimes more thinking, contemplating, finding ways to get metta going to difficult ones. At other times, just one-pointed, staying with that little formula. So finding the suffering and the difficult ones becomes much easier to have compassion and then metta. And upekkha is a very good one. If you can establish upekkha based on insight, contemplating the impermanence, contemplating not self, contemplating the effects of karma. For example, if you're so upset because a person is doing something really bad, if they're really doing something bad, they're obviously making lots of bad karma, and then they get a lot of pain as a result. So no need to be the avenger. The karma will sort it out anyhow. Because often we have this feeling that these people they shouldn't get away with it. It can be an argument to weaken our metta. So no one is getting away with anything. The principle of karma will always hold. So we don't have to worry that we have to be the avengers or the punishers, the judge. The executioner, we don't have to take that role. The other contemplation, what I perceive as the cause of my suffering, namely this person I'm angry at, the deeper cause of that suffering is actually not that person. That person is just a kind of means or tool how my own karma is coming at me. If I had never made any bad karma, I wouldn't encounter any people who hate me or who attack me. Either it can be an action now, and of course if I act incredibly provocative and then someone attacks me, it doesn't necessarily have to mean it was in the deep past lives, and it could be a result of my action now. But if I'm being kind of attacked out of the blue, or insulted out of the blue, then we can contemplate that there must be some karmic reason for that. And then we can contemplate if I retaliate now and also hurt that person back, then I make bad karma now. If I can restrain myself and can even respond with compassion or metta or forgiveness or equanimity, even to insults and injury, then it means that this bad karma which came at me through that person is gone now, and I haven't made any more bad karma, and I ideally have even made lots of good karma. Because to practice metta to someone attacking you is obviously heaps of good karma. And in this way it always gets better. That is one way trying to establish equanimity, the contemplation of Kamma, also the contemplation of impermanence. One example I like to give today, we have the 6th of July 2025. Most likely you got irritated about something today at some stage. Maybe you're quite upset about something. So now we go back to the 6th of July 2024. What were you so upset about on that day? I can't even remember. How about the 5th of July 2024? Also can't remember. Do you really think there were 2 days where you didn't feel irritated or upset about anything at all? I doubt it. No? This is showing, this is all gone, this is forgotten. So if you're upset about something now, just remember, if I ask you on the 6th of July 2026, most likely you can't even remember it. What is the point now getting so worked up about something which I can't even remember in a year's time? Contemplating impermanence. And contemplating death. I had this Air India flight just very shortly after this Air India flight crashed there, with everyone dying except one person. I was actually not particularly concerned. I also had on the ticket, now you can actually read what kind of aircraft it is. I had an Airbus, not the Boeing. Boeing. Didn't have a Boeing. But anyway, even so, if you fly, do you know sometimes the feeling when the turbulence comes? No, turbulence, please, all, and then you look out and the wings are moving. And at night time, maybe you fly into this big thunder cloud and you notice how it starts wobbling and the lightning is flashing. And the idea comes up now, what if this thing goes down now? So now imagine what you're very upset of, and imagine you're sitting in this aircraft and actually does come down. You look out and you watch how this wing breaks off, which is obviously there's no one going to survive that if you're flying there. Wing, just imagine that. Would you worry about this thing you're upset? That so-and-so said to you that so-and-so said that about you? These things can be really, really upset us. Ne? She told you that he said that she said this about you. So upset. Would you be still so upset if you're sitting in this aircraft and it goes down? Compared to death, this is all extremely minor. Death contemplation is a big wake that can wake a lot of useless stuff out of our mind, out of our brains. I can just wake that all away with death contemplation. How much is that of interest? If I were to die today, we wouldn't bother at all. Now these are using wisdom in order to establish equanimity, so that the upset, which is usually caused by unpleasant feeling. There's another thing to contemplate. What really makes us angry is actually not so much that person. What makes us angry is the feeling the person is giving us. It's the same actually on the other side, love, attachment, a central desire. It's not so much the person we fall in love with. It is the feeling that person is giving you. When you see that person, when you hear that person's voice, it feels so good. This is what it's about. The feeling is not about the person. It's a very egoistic thing, central love. As you may not believe me that, one proof for that is that sometimes quite quickly these feelings can change. And then you get the divorce. Where's the love now? It's the same person. I mean, not 100%, the person has changed very little. Particularly if it goes very quickly. The only thing that has changed, that they're giving you a different feeling now. And where before they gave you a pleasant feeling, now suddenly they give you an unpleasant feeling. Okay, divorce, end the relationship. This is what people do. Very egoistic thing in all regards. Similar with anger. Now that person gives you extremely unpleasant feeling, and what they're doing gives you an unpleasant feeling. That is also the bad thing about the attack. We wouldn't mind even the physical attack if I didn't feel it in some way. So already a good contemplation to bring it back, because it's no longer so personal about that person. You realize that actually what you're truly responding to is internally the feelings you have. painful feeling, unpleasant feeling. And of course, usually we dislike the unpleasant feeling and we like the pleasant one. And upekkha is letting go of that, of the liking and the disliking. So you have an unpleasant feeling and you don't dislike it. You let go of the disliking. You have got a pleasant feeling and you don't like it. Just let go of liking, disliking. Now that is upekkha. And if you do that, then people don't trigger you anymore. You know that he really triggered me. What does it mean? It was a strong feeling, usually a very unpleasant one or painful. And then I very much dislike this unpleasant feeling I feel and I want to get rid of it. And this is the whole anger, that's where the whole anger comes from. It's not he who triggered me. It's my response of dislike and wanting to get rid of to the unpleasant feeling that arose in my own mind. This is what's really happening. And if we contemplate that, that can help in seeing and watching that process. And if we have upekkha and we can let go of liking and disliking, you don't get triggered anymore. If you don't get triggered, it's obviously much easier to practice metta. You're no longer under this slavery of trying to get rid of these feelings and trying to get these other feelings and liking this, disliking that, and it's so much easier then. There are other things. And a very basic Buddhist practice is sense restraint. So before we see something, we contemplate, if I look there, if I see this form, or this vision, this image, this movie, this clip, could that trigger any states of aversion or desire in my mind? If so, you don't have to look there. Same with hearing. Hearing is a bit more difficult because you cannot easily look away, so to speak. You can't hear away so easily, but even so, you don't have to switch on that audio or whatever. And so on through all the six senses, in particular also the mind. If I think about this, if I think about this person, for example, could that trigger any strong feelings of love or hate? Yeah, if so, then just don't think about that person. Think about the Buddha. You will find in general that if you think about the Buddha for an hour, your metta will be going better than if you think about your least favorite politician for an hour. But we have a weird tendency that we also latch onto the things we hate and angry about. Anger, attachment, hatred is just a bond and an attachment, as is love and affection. Will bring us back again in future lives. That's also good contemplation. If you can't let go of your anger and hatred to anyone, the likelihood is that you meet them again as an enemy in future lives. But the point I wanted to make here, contemplating that, this is a bond, and that bond can lead us to constantly think about that person. I remember for the first Trump presidency, he didn't have that many funds, or didn't want to put that many funds in the campaign. And he didn't have to, because all mainstream media had such strong aversion to him that they constantly covered him. So he didn't have to do much advertising, because he was always covered anyhow, and everyone was talking about him. Although most were talking about him very negatively, and they didn't like him, but it was constantly in people's awareness. And you can notice that in your own mind, that things we really dislike, perversely, we still somehow read about that and we think about that. People almost love that. Going through the news, you already know that the news will be bad, isn't it? But what do you expect? What is the latest news out of Israel? Will that be good news, which makes you happy and delighted? Probably not. It will be probably in a very upsetting. So when one goes for that, then the mind will get very agitated. Or the war in Ukraine, if you go to the Twitter accounts covering that and so on. But fascinatingly, we can have a tendency to continue and getting stuck in that. There's some weird attachment and desire to go exactly into that stuff again, what triggers our anger. So sense restraint is understanding that and directing the mind instead to persons, subjects, in particular also thoughts. We have to practice sense restraint not just for the external senses but also for the mind. What do we think about? It relates closely to what we call wise attention. The yoniso manasikara, very, very important for our metta practice. And if we feel that our metta practice is not quite soaring high into the sky as we would like, check out throughout the day where you put your attention on. And of course, if we like to pay attention to things which are wrong, to things which are upsetting, triggering, it's much more difficult. Running out of time, but maybe I should still mention also contentment. This all goes closely together. Now, the more content we are with what we have, the more we appreciate what we have, the easier it will be to practice metta. If I compare myself all the time with people who have it better, then obviously I will feel quite discontent. I will feel jealous and I will feel envious and I will feel, why am I no good and they have it so much better. It's not easy out of a state of discontent and somehow envious, jealous. Out of that, now to develop metta is tough. On the other hand, if I'm very content, it's fantastic. I go to my kuti. Who can live like that? Very few. I'm not sure any place I really would want to swap. If I don't have any work or anything, and I'm in my kuti there, I'm extremely happy and content. And if one can achieve that, you're really content with what you have. Out of that, then to develop an attitude of loving kindness to oneself and others, much easier. Similar with gratitude, katanyo katavedi. Count your blessings, count all the good stuff you got from others. It doesn't mean that the good stuff you receive from a person, that this person didn't give you a headache and a hard time as well. It's actually normal for human beings. Now, sometimes they may really do good things to you and feel grateful. At other times they give you a really hard time, and this is normal. I mean, what do you expect? Human beings are not perfect. But we can decide what we remember. We can decide what we pay attention to. And if I remember all the good things people did to me, you will feel much, much happier. You can also contemplate long lists of complaints you have about anyone you know. If you try hard, I think you will be able to find weaknesses and faults and things that were not well done in absolutely everyone you know. And people would find fault with the Buddha even. So again, it's normal for in particular non-enlightened beings. They have flaws and do bad things, at least occasionally. But the question is, what do we focus on? And if we focus on gratitude and we fully acknowledge all the good stuff we have received, much, much easier to do metta afterwards. If you complain for an hour what your parents and relatives and friends and what is all good, not good about them, it will be very hard to swap over to metta. So these are all supportive factors: gratitude, contentment, and also forgiveness. So that can be a good foundation. If your metta doesn't really take off, look whether there's some grudge. Is there someone you're still holding back, you just don't want to forgive them? Because as long as there's even just one person where you definitely don't want to forgive them, it will always limit your metta. We're not really sore. So no one can check out, is there someone? Again, forgiveness doesn't condone. It doesn't mean you're agreeing with what this person did. It doesn't mean even that you have to become buddy-buddy again. Because some people are so toxic, it's obviously better to stay away if that's possible. Sometimes you can't. But if it's possible and if someone is really bad, as the Buddha says, aseva nacha balanang is the greatest blessing. Avoiding fools. And obviously someone who is toxic or someone who harms you and so on is obviously a fool. A wise person doesn't harm others. So it may be still appropriate to try completely avoiding that person. But that doesn't mean that you can't forgive them. There's two different things. Same with metta. As we chant in the snake protection chant, Kanda Parita, we are radiating metta to all the snakes and all the creepy crawlies, and in the end the chant actually says, so may these beings go away. It's not necessarily a contradiction. I wouldn't recommend that as your main metta practice. It's obviously not a classic metta attitude, but for some beings it's actually better to be separate. So just not to block your forgiveness. It doesn't mean that you have to move in with that person. It only means that we let go of our grudge and resentment and so on. So forgiveness, gratitude, contentment, sense restraint and wise attention. If this makes you angry, then just don't go there, don't think about it. Don't watch that movie. If we are so attached to the bhava and experience and being and experiencing that people, for example, watch horror movies, which, as the name implies, gives you feelings, emotions of horror, or really disgusting movies, splatter, how do we call that? I don't know, in the splatter movies, why would one do that? Deliberately triggering horror in your mind. But we can be attached to that. So we have to be careful, sense restraint, particular of the mind, particular with news also, and of course social media. Nowadays, and if it's a generation under 50, actually even the oldies nowadays are all on Facebook. So for almost everyone nowadays, if you completely cut off all social media, probably 80-90% of what is triggering you will be gone already. And much less anger. So sense restraint, very important. Then the other Brahmavihāras. If metta doesn't work, try compassion. Those who heard, find what they are suffering from. And usually the most difficult people you often find also have lots of suffering. And that makes it easier to forgive and have compassion. Upekkha, contemplating impermanence, contemplating death, contemplating the next year. I can't even remember what I'm so upset about right now. That's all that we establish upekkha. And if we don't have, or if we can weaken our liking and disliking, in particular of the feelings others give us, we will be able to practice metta much easier. Kalyana Mettā. Hang out with people who have lots of metta. It's very easy if you're hanging out with Ajahn Dhammasiha to have metta. If you spend time with a really grumpy, angry person, it will be difficult. It was so striking in this place where he lived, and it was lay accommodation. But when he stayed there, and you go there, and everyone just wanted to stay there, and we couldn't get anyone to stay in the monastery because they all wanted to hang out with Ajahn Dhammasiha in the group, traveling with him. They're very happy to just share this one toilet. Ajahn Dhammasiha had his own personal one, the rest had to share, and to sleep just on the couch or the floor. That they didn't matter, as long as they had this metta, because it just feels so good. So hanging out with people with a strong metta, kalyana Mettā, very supportive for your own metta practice, and avoiding the angry, grumpy ones, resentful, hateful ones, if one can. And finally, keeping at it. It's a long-term commitment, long-term effort, just keeping at it. And never giving up. If we really get angry, then we think, there's no point, I can't do metta. No. Never mind, the moment mindfulness comes, okay, I got angry, let's go for metta. You must keep going. Okay, a bit delayed. Thank you for your attention. May you all be happy and at ease. May you all be free from pain and suffering. May you all become enlightened. May you all be suffused with unconditional goodwill to all beings. May you be free from anger. May you have unconditional loving kindness to everyone.